Good evening, everyone. As Todd said, you were warned. We said, if you don't talk, I will, and here I am. And I don't just do it this month, I can do this all year. So I reckon you should blink before I do. So I will continue speaking. So I'm going to talk about tonight Spring 24 features for developers. As we've cut into quite a bit of my time, I've obviously completely reworked my deck to be much shorter. Certainly didn't start out as a short deck. That has worked out very well for me. Not at all. Artificial intelligence. DALL-E 3. Look what it can draw. I could practice to the end of time and I could not draw anything like that. And yet I said, draw me an ant on a rocking chair with a white beard, sipping lemonade and looking retired. And that's what it came up with. Awesome. Looking retired, yeah, looking relaxed. So the ant migration tool is retiring. Does anyone still use the ant migration tool? Well, you need to stop. It's the end of that. But it will continue to work. Won't receive updates and they won't support it. They'll probably just laugh at you if you phone up and say it's not working. Move to the Salesforce CLI. You can do everything you can in Ant. It's much easier and you don't have to write loads of Java in order to get a new feature in there. You can write it in Node instead. Lightning App Builder. So the reason I've mentioned this one, so this isn't coding, this isn't development, but this can stop you having to do development, I think, and will allow me to retire a few components of my own. So dynamic forms are going to be able to add related object fields. So up to 2 levels, and it won't be polymorphic relationships, but you can, for example, on a contact here, you can have a section in dynamic forms, a field section, which pulls loads of information from the account. And if you've got other related objects, you can pull all those in as well. So you don't have to burn loads of formula fields to get that information out there if you only need it for display. You don't have to write a custom component that pulls that information through and displays it. So that's really cool. I think that will stop you having to do some coding. You can also set field visibility by device, so you can hide things based on if someone's accessing from a mobile device, for example. You could have a key info here, where if you're on a desktop, it shows you 20 or 30 fields, but because they're on a mobile with a smaller device, only shows a couple, and you can do all that without coding, which again, never used to be able to. And you can, when you're moving things around, you can see the object relationship and API name, which sounds like, why on earth would you want that? Don't you know the name of it? Don't you know what your field does? Go into mature org, a legacy org with like 800 fields in it, at least 11 of which are called exactly the same thing, and try and figure out where you're going from that. So that's really helpful. Lightning Web Components. This isn't actually part of this release, but I like to remind people about it all the time. We have component level versioning in Lightning Web Components. And what that means is you specify an API level and the behavior will match that API version. Now this is simulation, so it's not like it's got that old code and it puts it in. It'll do its best, but it means that if there's a new feature and you don't want to enable that in your code yet, you just leave your API version lower than that. Only goes back to 58, so it came in, what would that be, summer 23? Only goes back to 58, so if you do 54, it will treat it like 58, and if you put it later than the org API, it will just treat it as the current release until that release goes live, and then suddenly you'll get all that new functionality, which might not be what you want. And there's a change to some of the internals of Lightning Web Components. So where you used to get empty text nodes, so something like this, you had an LWC if show welcome, then put the welcome out. What you used to get was just that, just welcome inside quotes, and that was it. What you'll now get is an empty comment above and an empty comment below, which I'm guessing allows them to identify where that has gone a little bit better. But that's your reminder that if you're doing UI tests that rely on knowing the internals of Lightning Web Components, you're going to spend a lot of time nurturing them, because this stuff does change under the hood, especially at the moment where it's all relatively new. Lightning Web Components, if you've got any decorators in non-Lightning element classes, I mean, why would anyone do that? But if you have, and you set your API version to 60 or above, it will fall over. If you are doing things in Lightning Console applications, then you can now do that with the Lightning Workspace, like LWC Workspace API. That's gone GA. So that means that you can do everything in Lightning Web Components rather than having to fall back on old Aura-style APIs, etc. This does require Lightning Web Security, which I think, are you talking about that later on, Todd?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So you might even find out why or understand why. And there's a Lightning Record Picker component, which allows you to find and click on, or find and select up to 100 records in one go. I tried to do a screenshot of that, but really it just looked like something with a record name in it. It wasn't very exciting. I like things like this. This makes me feel like we're becoming a real programming language all of a sudden. The null coalescing operator rolls glibly off the tongue. It's like real, isn't it? We've got switch statements now and null coalescing. We've got the Elvis operator. Wow, it's like we're a real programming language, Giuseppe. So 2 question marks. If you put those in, it'll evaluate the left-hand operand. And if that is null, it'll evaluate the right-hand operand. and they must be of the same type or automatically promotable to the same type. So you can't compare a contact with a lead. You can't check a contact, decide that's null, and return a lead instead. And it's not supported in SOCL bind expressions. So you can't have a bind expression which is colon, then something, question mark, something else. You have to do that outside of the SOCL query. What that means is that rather than doing something like this, so I've got a list, I've got a map of contacts by account ID, and I get that, and then I want to say, well, if it's null, I want to return an empty list. So I have all this code there. What I can now do is this. And I just say, left-hand operand contacts for account.get account ID, question mark, that says if that's null, then do this one instead. So my list of contacts in a single line, if the left-hand side is null, then it creates me a new list, and then I return those. So that looks a bit smarter. You can also put any expression you like in there, pretty much. So I've got an opportunity. It's either opportunity 1, or I want to select from opportunity where the name is default, and hope that I only have one default because I haven't done any checking on that. So that could error. But yeah, you can put select statements in there. You can also chain them. Sorry. I was going to say, can you chain them? You can chain them. Oh! So with this, I'm saying is opportunity 1 is defined, use it. If opportunity 2 is defined, then use it. Otherwise, return a new opportunity. Chaining them might sound great. It's not always good. Think about clarity. Think about those that come after. So this is something which is going to return a string, which is the title of a contact or a lead matching the email address. Oh, that's good. That's Polar Code has started doing that now. It's dropped my bracket onto the next line. But basically, what I'm doing is I'm running a SOCL query, getting the first response, looking at the title. If that's blank, I run another SOCL query. This time I limit it to 1. If I get the title there, if that's not, then I return this string. And I could keep nesting that, but yeah, there's no reason to. It's not ideal, and it's not very helpful for those that come afterwards. But very cool operator. That'll retire some of my code for sure. We've also got the UUID class, version 4 universally unique identifier. Cryptographically strong, pseudo-random number generator. Sounds like the blockbuster coming in summer. So basically, it's random unique IDs where that's important to you. Collisions are highly unlikely, and it's ideal where it needs to be unique, and you don't want it to be anything predictable about it, like where it came from. Version 3 UUIDs, the first few characters were the context of where it was being generated from, so you could effectively see there was a range of them coming from a single place. With this, you can't. So that means when you're looking at that, it's going to be very difficult to identify any context because all elements of it are random. So if you need that, you can get that. LWC mixed shadow mode. So when Salesforce first introduced Lightning Web Components, and when web components generally came along, only the modern browsers supported shadow mode. So Salesforce did a polyfill, which is essentially JavaScript that adds in functionality that's missing from the browser. That means that your code can run. And they did a synthetic shadow mode for that. But most of them support this now. Allegedly, it improves speed. There was a statement of native components are up to 50% faster than synthetic shadow mode. And apparently it can reduce the, I should say size, LWC size, the size of your component, because it won't have the synthetic polyfill in. However, just using a native component at the moment won't remove the synthetic polyfill, so we don't know when that's going to happen. That needs to come along at some point in time. So when this first came out, you had shadow support mode to any, and that basically said it would use synthetic native mode if that was available, and if not, it would fall back on synthetic. So they've changed that to any has been deprecated, and now you have to say native. So I think what they're trying to do is say, rather than them helping you, you need to take the action to move everything to native mode and then indicate you've done that. And what you're saying is that everything uses native shadow mode, everything that's included in the chain. So if it doesn't, that might break. And base Lightning components apparently will break. So don't do that. Yeah, I don't know. That's what that's the advice in the release notes, is not to use it with Lightning, base Lightning components. Could be. And that's how you define shadow support mode. You do it in JavaScript. Woo! Scratch all snapshots. The best stuff in this release is in beta, for sure. Scratch org snapshots are awesome. I've been playing around with these, which was quite the event in itself to figure out how I could actually get this working in preview mode. But what it is, essentially, it's a snapshot of your Scratch org at a point in time. So I had a continuous integration build, which would spin up a Scratch org, deploy the code, set up a bunch of data, assign some permission sets, run various tests, do a few other bits and pieces. And that used to take 30 minutes to get built to the point where I could start doing usable testing on it. Using Scratch org snapshots, that took 6 minutes to create something from the snapshot. So that would have saved me quite a lot of time in any of my overnight builds. And also I used to do that quite a lot during the day just to spin up a new version to start working on.
How do you stop the org being stale?
What do you mean, how do you stop the org being stale? Well,
you're copying an existing org that's potentially 30 days old.
They expire after 30 days anyway, so they're only intended to be ephemeral. So it,
copy saying this completion to day 29. You know, permanent deadlines again, not going back to the source.
well, you could do that. They could do that. That could give you 59 days, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to stop that. But why would you do it? I mean, you can remove them from the dev hub. You can easily take them out. But yeah, people would be mad to do that kind of thing. Mad.
So what's the flow here you create?
Create Scratch org.
And made it look like you want it to look, and then you define that as being one that you can.
Yeah, then you run a CLI command, you say create a snapshot from this org, that's stored in your dev hub, and people can then say create me a new org from this snapshot for up to 30 days.
Do you then redeploy your config?
No, it's all there. Your config and your data, everything is in there.
Yeah, but you can put the diff
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
faster than spinning it.
But yeah, and if you're doing it in part of a continuous integration thing, you can do that every night. You can create the new snapshot that everyone uses the next day. That would be my idea of how you'd work, because if it expires after 30 days, it might as well expire after 1 day, right?
Is there a limit for how many snapshots?
There is a limit. It's all in preview mode at the moment, so the limit's quite low. But it's, yeah, they are really cool. And yeah, that's with like 9,000 metadata components and not a lot of data. You've still got limits around data, so it can only have 200 meg because it's a Scratch org. But yeah, it's just so much easier. It's just one command as well, rather than a chain of commands, each of which could go wrong at any point in time. Yes. Once you take the snapshot, that has another 30 days before that goes, so people can then use that up to that point in time. There seems to be some discussion as to what that should do. There is a body of opinion that it should be like a sandbox and last forever, which most sane people think is a bad idea, because why would you want to do that? And they're kind of, I think you should treat them like Scratch orgs, to be honest. They're kind of disposable starting points, and you just move on the next day from them. There's also a big debate as to whether these replace sandboxes, which I don't think they do, because certainly if you look at a pre-production environment hooked into loads of test systems, etc., you really wouldn't want to be recreating that every 30 days, for sure. But for developers, I think this will be great. If you know you're onboarding a new developer who needs an environment set up, you can get a snapshot set up for the day they join, or you could do them as part of your continuous integration. Loads of uses for them, and they do work, which is really unusual for something that's in preview. The whole thing worked end to end, which I was really shocked by.
Does it make more sense to be able to download that snapshot? You use it every time you get a new developer, you need to set up an org, get something from your repo, pre-built snapshot, and just create a Scratch org from that.
I think you're thinking about it the same way that I have from an ISP point of view, that we could have a Scratch org that's got all the other stuff in.
Yeah, but that's what you,
But not
you
your-
do with the dev hub, right?
Yeah, you.
Not your developers, like, you say, right, here's this.
Yeah, but I mean, this one
And it's packaged.
No, it's got all your stuff in it as well. It's got all your metadata, all your
It
data.
doesn't have to, I guess.
No,
So I'm
that's
thinking
right.
about, like an org that was ready for my dev to start working, but without our stuff.
Yeah, you could do that. You just do a snapshot once, so you can install packages and things like that, and then take a snapshot then. So mine goes through a multi-step process where it creates a Scratch org, installs 4 packages, deploys a load of metadata, and then creates some data, and then assigns permission sets, and all that stuff is there. Used to take half an hour, yeah, and it takes 6 minutes to create from the snapshot.
something like that, even not just for like a new developer, but any kind of developer who needs to work on something, needs to work on a new feature, once you spin up a Scratch org, instead of having to wait 30 minutes for every ticket that they start working on, there should be just a predefined snapshot that is downloaded to a repo, and they can just create an environment straight away.
Yeah, and it also gives you the ability to have a kind of a predefined org, this is what we will start on, rather than checking out the latest code and installing it or whatever. You can take it from a known point in time that you're happy with and you want everyone branching off, if that makes sense to you.
Sorry, one more. Do you copy from the org tables?
Yeah, you say create a snapshot with target org of this. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my idea would be that my continuous integration would probably still do that build, and then at the end of it, it'd create a new snapshot, and we're ready to go the next morning when people come in. Flow repeater component. I really like this because basically what it allows you to do is define a form, something like this, first name, last name, date of birth, relationship to you, and then have a little plus add, and it adds in another one. The reason I really like that is I've done that about 11 times on various pages where I need to do you want to add another one? Do you want to add another one? And this allows you to do it really easily, and then it just gives you a collection with everything in there that you iterate to process. So I really like that, and I also like the fact that it's the repeater and it's in beta. That just kind of flows very nicely, I think. Zip in Apex, very excited about this. Very excited. Been trying to do Zip in Apex in various ways, not very well, for probably 10 years now at least. So this is in dev preview, which means, and it's only available in Scratch orgs. So you have to define a Scratch org with this feature, and that will be enabled. And the reason for that is this seems to be something that the Apex team are now doing, where they can try stuff out and get lots of feedback without being committed to maintaining this in like developer orgs, etc., going forward. So it's always disposable orgs, and worst case, they're stuck with something for 30 days. So this allows you to create compressed zip files in code and extract files from compressed zip files in code. You don't have to expand entire files. You can specify compression methods, all sorts of things you can do with it. Did I? That's unusual.
Yeah, let me just make a note.
I was going to say, can we get a tweet out about that?
Put that review on the website.
Like that they're moving now to do like beta testing in Scratch rather than
I think some features they are. So what Daniel Ballinger said was that the alternative to this was to make it a pilot, so only customers could have it, and it would have to go through the AEs and all that, and you wouldn't get the right feedback because of the lack of control they have if they put it into full beta or they make it available in developer editions which live on. They're kind of stuck maintaining it, whereas this is a good way of allowing them to introduce this, and then if it all goes horribly wrong, a month later, no one's got any idea. So there's some code that's basically creating a simple zip. So got create my compression zip writer, add an entry of zs.csv. That's I just did a straightforward string to blob, name, title, Keir, CEO, got delusions of grandeur. And then I do get archive, and at that point in time, I've got the blob that represents the zip file. Create a content version, give it a title, give it a description, tell it the path on client, and insert it. And what that gives me, when I go into files, I've got my little zip sample.zip. I did this yesterday, as you can see. So it was still working at 5:45 last night. Does it support what? Oh, I don't know. You'd have to try.
No one knows what
Could you password them? Haven't seen any way to do that yet, but we are in preview, so that might come. And this is where I'm extracting it. So I've queried my content version. Fun fact, from Lightning Web Components and Visualforce, I can do that once and only once in a particular request sequence. Next time I try and do it, I can't turn it into a zip file. Don't know why. We're in preview mode. All good fun. But I get to see my page once and then it disappears. So I then get the blob out of the content version, my version data, turn that into a zip reader, and then I pull the entry out. I can get me a list of entries. I can pull a particular entry. I can extract. So I've asked it to get the entry zs.csv, which is the one I created up here. CSV is reader.extract of the CSV entry, and then I debug out the body. And what that does is that dumps out name, title, Keir, CEO, and that came out of a debug log, so it must be true. Must have worked. And it does work. Again, just does some weird things at the moment. It does. It is still subject to governor limits, but it's likely to be more efficient than anything we do purely in Apex, I think, so it's helping. But yeah, it's not a silver bullet, unfortunately. And this is another one that's in developer preview, which is evaluating dynamic formulas in Apex. And I really like this one. So got a new namespace. You can recalculate formula fields without going back to the database. However, one of the things I put in here, you can evaluate with a record using formula instance. You can also do it with a class, so you don't actually have to have a record. You can define a function. So if there's a function that you like and need that isn't available in Apex, you can define a class, build a formula using Formula Builder, pass the class rather than the record to it, and have that evaluate, as I will shortly demonstrate. So it took me a while to find one that I actually cared about that wasn't available in Apex as well, because Apex can do a lot of it. But init cap, so what init cap does is it takes a string and it capitalizes the first letter of each word. Vital work. So it's really disappointing we haven't got that. There's hundreds of ideas that have been open for years. So I need a string carrier, which is going to have my candidate in there. And here is my, I think I've even highlighted. Oh, look at that. So here is my text, capitals all over the place. So then I've got my formula builder. So I create a builder with return type of string, with type string carrier.class, so that's what I'm passing in. With formula init cap candidate, so candidate is that, it's not a field on an object. Then I do build, and then I do evaluate, and I pass in my candidate from up here. And what happens is, in my debug, after init cap, it's done the capitalization. Again, it's come from a debug log, must be true. And again, works. But really pleased, really excited about the fact that you can do that with records. You don't need objects. I think that saves us a lot of pain and allows us to do one or two things that are quite handy. That's it. Those are the things I got excited about. So quite short. It's quite handy. I'm also doing, if you're interested in everything else that's going on in Spring 24 release, I'm doing a webinar on that on Wednesday, the 7th of February. So feel free to join. Thank you very much.